Hey guys, this is Jeff Stanek with Figured Out Baseball. We've got a great Figured Out Baseball podcast for you today. For those of you who really enjoy our podcasts with professional players, we've got another one on the podcast today. We're being joined by Riley Tirotta today. He is a minor league third baseman in the Toronto Blue Jays organization that I'm pretty excited to have on the podcast. He is from South Bend, Indiana. He played collegiately at Dayton University, which is a Division I school in the Atlantic 10, obviously in Dayton, Ohio. He was drafted in the 12th round in 2021, which was sort of a senior year because of COVID. The 2020 season was cut short and players got their eligibility back. So academically, he was a senior, but as far as eligibility-wise, he was a junior. But he was drafted that year in the 12th round, 2021. In 2021 for Dayton, he was a second-team all-conference player, tied for the Atlantic 10 lead with 16 home runs. He hit .337 overall, slugged .696, which is an outstanding number for a college player, draft-eligible college player. Then he played this summer of 2021, his first pro season with the Dunedin Blue Jays, the low-A affiliate of the Toronto Blue Jays. With Dunedin in 95 at-bats, he hit .305 with a .429 on-base percentage and .818 OPS. A really good first pro season for Riley, and as he's gearing up for a second season, he's joining us today in the podcast. So Riley, I certainly appreciate your time, and I'm excited about this one.
Absolutely. It's great to be here, man. Thank you.
So I typically like to start with something from the bio that stands out. And for you, I'm interested to talk about several things with you, but the first one, we touched briefly before we started recording on the draft and the fact that you had an option to come back and play one more year, although you would have had to, probably take some grad school classes or whatever, but you did have 1 year of eligibility left. And I think the whole COVID thing has, it's kind of thrown a wrench into the draft. The 2020 draft was very short, obviously, and there were a lot of guys that, that would have been top 10 rounders that came back for the 2021 draft. So the 2021 draft was crazy and was very crowded. And, I'm just kind of interested as to, leading up to the draft, Riley, I think it's something that a lot of players and coaches enjoy hearing about that process, especially guys like me who never got to go through it. Just what that was like for you. Can you kind of talk about the time leading up to the draft and draft day? Just what your expectations were and, what the nerves were like or what you did on draft day to kind of keep your mind occupied until your name was finally called in the 12th round on day 2 of the draft.
Yeah, so I kind of had it different than a lot of guys, because I was hoping to get drafted in 2020 and didn't put up the best numbers in the little amount of games that we had. I think we might have played 15 games, and so I started off pretty slow. And when the season got canceled, when everything came out, I was looking like I was going to be like a 6th to 7th round in the 2020 drafts, and then they came out with there only being 5 rounds, so that kind of threw a wrench in my whole 2020 draft. But we still watched it. We were still hoping that I would have a shot. Turned out that I didn't, obviously, because I got picked in 2021. But so that was a little bit of a setback in my opinion. But from day one when the draft in 2020 didn't work out, I had my sights set on the next year, and it was new because I was going to be a senior, so we were wondering about how the whole process was going to work when that came. But leading up to the 2021 draft, I was like, you know what, I'm a senior. We have a really good team at Dayton, so I was like, let's do everything we can to have a good season here at Dayton, and put together a good team, and just kind of do everything that I could to help the team win. And so that was basically my thought process leading up to the draft. The year before, I was like, all right, we got scouts here today. We got to play well. And then, I didn't want to put myself through that for 2 years, and because it was draining mentally. Everything, you get tight in the box. You're not worried. You're not focused on just hitting the ball hard. You're focused on how your swing looks or what outcome I get here. What is that scout going to think of me? So kind of went away from that, my senior year. And I think that just comes with age too. You just learn what works and what doesn't. And so all of 2021, was just, help the team win, put together good at-bats, made a swing change in the middle of the season that helped me out a lot. And then just leading up to the draft, it was like, here we go. We're projected in like the 7th, 8th round, possibly on day 2. So day 1 went, I knew I wasn't probably going to go on day 1 within the first 1 or 2 rounds, how many ever they do. So day 2 came and we were sitting around, we had calls. I was talking to my agent the whole time. He helped me out a lot through the process, and, nothing just really worked out, in my favor. The offers that came my way, they weren't the best for me and my family at the time. So we put day 2 on hold, and I trusted in what my agent had to say, and he said, give it a shot on day 3. Day 3 came around. We were sitting around the TV just watching the stream because they didn't have it on MiLB Network. Of course, we had to stream it. Day 3 of the draft, that's how it goes. But so we were watching it, and I get a call from the scout that I know through the Blue Jays, who just came out to Dayton a lot. We kind of built a relationship, and he'd always said he wanted to get me, and we kind of formed that bond. And I saw him all over the country at different games and stuff like that. And he called me and said, "Hey man, we're gonna pick you here in our 12th round." So it was an awesome feeling, just knowing that you were gonna get picked. And then finally, when I saw my name come across the screen, it was just like a whole sigh of relief from 2 years of going through the process, and then just like a lifelong goal of mine to be drafted. It finally came true. It was something very special.
I think it's so cool and such a good story. I think that what you experience is probably what a lot of guys experience when they have a chance to get drafted. When your quote unquote junior season hits, which would have been 2020, your first time you're draft eligible, you start thinking about it a little bit. You start thinking about scouts being around and trying to perform for the scouts instead of just being focused on your team. And obviously you said that you had a swing change during that 21 season as well, but your focus changed more to just being focused on hitting the ball hard and helping the team win, and it didn't focus so much on impressing scouts and what the results looked like, things like that, and how much it affected you. And obviously you put up really good numbers as a senior. I think it's something that a lot of guys probably deal with and go through. So in a way, you're probably kind of lucky that the 2020 season was cut short and you had a chance, to perform for a full season in 21. Now, once you got to pro ball, Riley, if there was anything, can you point to anything that was a lot different about pro ball than as opposed to college? Whether it was the way that the pitchers attacked you, or the caliber of arms you were seeing day to day, or I know you hit with a wood bat before in summer ball, but like if just going from metal bat in the spring to a wood bat all summer with Dunedin, if that's a huge change. Can you just talk about if there's anything that stands out to you, anything that was a pretty big difference for you from going from college baseball to pro ball?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a ton of differences, and obviously the pitchers are better. You're seeing more velocity at a higher volume. Everyone throws 95. Everyone's got a guy that throws 100. Every team has a guy. Definitely velocity was the main thing that kind of got me. We would see one arm a weekend in college that threw hard, and that was basically it. The rest of the guys were 88, 90. There would be a few 94, 95 guys, but that's just the biggest difference for me coming from a mid-major conference, seeing 88, 90, 91, and then going to pro ball, it was everyone threw hard, man. So it was like, and yeah, of course, the wood bat's definitely different. And I'd swung it in the past, in summer ball, but I always went back to the trusty metal bats, and those are a lot more forgiving than a wood bat, especially when you take away that metal bat and you're seeing better pitchers every day. It's like it's a whole new ball game. So that's something that I kind of just knew was going to happen. You know, pitchers are going to be better. You know, you're going to swing a wood bat. So it's just kind of, you can't let it take you for a surprise. If that makes sense. It's like, yeah, it's going to be harder. So basically, what are you going to do about it? Honestly, is kind of how I took it, and you know, that's just getting your timing down early. You know, you got to be on time for that fastball, and it's harder than it was before. So you got to load earlier, or you know, simplify everything so you know you have a chance for that 95-mile-an-hour fastball every day, because everyone throws it. You know, so I think it's just about gearing up for that and knowing what you're getting yourself into, and that comes from scouting reports and just trusting yourself to not change anything, to just keep playing the game like you know how to play it, just at a higher level, and you know you're good enough to be there and all that stuff, you know. So you got to have confidence in yourself, and just kind of take everything else away and just play the game like you know how to play.
So you may have already answered this, but with going to pro ball and you're seeing, you know, premium velocity every day, probably particularly out of the bullpens, you know, good velocity for starters, and probably seeing some really hard throwers out of the bullpens almost every day. Was there any change to your approach or mechanics or anything else just to help you make that adjustment? Or, I mean, you mentioned timing. Was it just a matter of you know, working on timing and just making that a focus in your practice, in your cage work, things like that, just you know, keeping your timing as sharp as possible?
Yeah, something we worked on in draft camp was, I've always hit off the machine in the season just to make sure I'm on time, and you know, dial it up so it's a little more firm than you're used to. But we started using this machine called an iPitch, and we would use these little dimpled orange wiffle balls, and not wiffle balls, they were like hard plastic, but it would simulate an arm, and so we would see 94, 95 with a high spin rate in draft camp, and you know, I'm used to hitting off machines hard, like with good velocity, but at like a shorter distance with regular baseballs and like zero spin rate going into it. So when I was seeing these iPitch machines when we would take batting practice in the cage, it would be a guy with 95-mile-an-hour fastball, but it's such a high spin rate, so it would look like it would come up. So that was something that I wasn't used to, and you know, I wanted to take the same swing because my swing had worked during the college season, so I was like, you know, we just got to start a little bit earlier and simplify my load, but everything else stays the same. And that's kind of something that helped me leading up to the low A season for that 3-week camp that we had before, right after the draft. Just hitting off that thing every day really got me ready for the fastballs that they knew I was going to be seeing every day.
What about for the timing? You know, just working on timing. I talk a lot in these podcasts about things that people talk about, you know, trending things, buzzwords, whatever that people use on Twitter, because I think that's where a lot of baseball information is shared, and a lot of it's great. You know, a lot of it better than others, I think. But are there any certain cues that you use for yourself for timing? Like, are there certain ways you like to verbalize it, or certain things that make sense to you more than others? And I'll ask, you know, you talked about just kind of getting loaded earlier. Are you, you know, and I've never seen you hit. Are you a guy with a big leg kick that just needs to happen on time? Are you, and you mentioned kind of simplifying things as well. Can you kind of talk about some things that you focus on with your timing, whether it is just verbal cues or whether it's, you know, certain things in your setup and load that just need to happen with certain timing to, you know, to make you on time and to be ready to hit those good premium fastballs?
Right. So, like I said, I made that swing change, and that's something that I kind of took out of my swing is, you know, I still have a little bit of a leg kick, but before I had a pretty high leg kick, and the high leg kick didn't work for me just because I would have to be perfectly on time every single time if I wanted to make consistent contact. And obviously that's not going to happen because you got, you know, off-speed pitches that are made for you to be off time. So I simplified that, and I still have a little bit of a leg kick, but I'm a lot wider now, so I can't have quite as high of a leg kick. So I just simplified everything with that. And then something that has worked for me recently, and I forget who told me this back in the day, but the cue for me to start my timing is the same with every guy. It's just if a guy's, and then that is the leg break and the hand break of a pitcher, either in his windup or in the stretch. As soon as that lead leg and the hands break, that's when I'm starting my load. And if I know a guy's throwing hard, my load is going to be simpler and quieter. But if there's a lefty up there who's throwing 88, 91, I have a little bit more time to load. So that handbrake is still the same, but if a guy isn't throwing hard, I'm still loading at the same time. I just have a little bit more room to get a little bit bigger in my swing, and that's just something that I feel comfortable with. And that took a long time for me to really get comfortable with that. And that was before I was just I wanted to be in my balance position at a good spot, and so I was loading at the same time with every guy, and I wasn't making an adjustment based on his pitch velocity or anything like that. So I think the main thing that I really focus on is making sure I'm starting my load as he's breaking his hand and his foot and his leg, and the other thing that makes me be on time every time is making sure that my load is finishing. I'm in my stride and I'm in my balance position before that ball is halfway to me at home plate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, what you said, I think is similar to what I hear from other guys on here. I like to, I like to talk about hitting to, I have a lot of college guys on here, but with college coaches and even pro guys when we come on. And I like to ask different questions to see how different people, how they internalize things and in the verbiage that they use, things like that. I think it's all very, very interesting stuff. This podcast today is brought to you by Crossover Symmetry. For all baseball players, if you want to increase velocity without losing command or throw out runners from anywhere on the field, check out armcare.com. Developed by Crossover Symmetry, armcare.com measures your arm strength and delivers customized prep, strength, and recovery training based off what you need most that day. Gain velocity through targeted training while also having your best stuff every game. Armcare.com is used at every level of baseball for players who want an advantage over their competition and take their health and performance seriously. Go to armcare.com and get started today. So, Riley, I know the thing that I just, and I hate to focus so much on, what you hear from other coaches or in the Twitterverse on these podcasts, but sometimes I think it's necessary, and I think it's important to hear from someone like you who's there, who's in it, who's had some really good coaches and has just transitioned from college to pro ball. So you're hearing some different voices, and you're around different kinds of players. How similar would you say that your swing is? Let's start just mechanically. How similar would you say that your swing is to other guys that you play with now? To guys that you've seen in pro ball, and we'll go back even some of the better players that you played, college baseball with. How similar is your swing mechanically to other guys that you're around?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's swing's different, but there's pieces of every swing that are the exact same. It doesn't really matter. Like somebody like Vlad Jr., he toe taps, but he still gets to his 50-50 launch position. He still separates his hips and his shoulders and gets his bat on plane early. I mean, those are three things that is in every high-level successful hitter's swing. Besides you got some guys who do something completely out of the ordinary and are good, and that's just because they're freak athletes and they're more talented in that way. But everyone's swing may look different, and the start and finish of their swing might be a little more colorful, I guess you could say. You know, they might have a high leg kick or a huge barrel tip with their upper half, or you know, they might do the Ken Griffey Jr. finish, you know, all the way back or something like that. But in the middle of that swings, and every swing somewhere somebody that has a good swing, all of those things are consistent in every one of those swings. You know, everyone's on plane early. You know, hip and shoulder separation to get that stretch in your swing, and then everyone gets to the balance position. You can't hit at a high level successfully unless you get to that balance position, because you won't be on time if you're not. You know what I mean?
Do you find that that coaches need to go about things differently with different hitters, even though there are a lot of similarities in the swing, and ultimately there are going to be sort of these checkpoints, I guess, that are in basically every swing? Do you still find, just from observing, obviously you don't coach, but from observing coaches at college and in pro ball, that coaches have to go about it differently with different guys, say things in different ways, maybe use different drills, or whatever it is to get the same result, but because guys think differently and their bodies move differently? Do you see that? Is that something that you've observed, or do you think that there are certain things that kind of work for a lot of guys on the coaching side, just to, verbalizing things as well?
Yeah, I think different guys retain stuff differently, and of course everyone swings different, and nobody's body is the exact same as somebody else next to them. So there's different ways that coaches need to communicate with the guy, or, instead of changing his leg kick, make him start his leg kick earlier and make sure he's in that 50-50 position, because that's where he has to be to hit successfully. And that's something I've seen. Yeah, you see a coach who is very, he's very cookie cutter. Every guy he's telling the same guy, he's telling different guys the same exact thing, and that thing might not work for that one guy, but that doesn't make him a bad hitter. That he just isn't understanding what you're telling him, or you're trying to get him into a movement that he can't even, his body doesn't allow him to get into. His hips are very tight. That's something that I deal with too, is hip mobility, and getting into certain positions that are a little bit more difficult for me. I can't do it in my swing because I can't do it in the weight room, so in the weight room, I have to work on getting into positions that allow me to get into that position and swing, if that makes sense. So, for me, in the weight room, I really focus on getting into my back hip. So I'm a righty. I hit right-handed. I make sure I'm getting into my right hip on, RDLs, single leg movements, so I really can sink into that back hip and fire from that back hip, because if I'm not focusing on that, I'll just drift forward and kind of push everything instead of turning from that back hip and launching through the ball in that back hip.
For you personally as a hitter, Riley, and I know we're talking mostly about hitting. Maybe we should talk about some other stuff too, but I just find it really interesting to talk about hitting. You tied for the Atlantic 10 lead with 16 home runs the year you got drafted, and then you went into pro ball and you had a great year offensively, but you hit 1 home run in 95 at bats. Do you think of yourself as a power hitter? Do you think of yourself as a guy that's a hit first? And extra base hits just happen when they happen. Do you consider yourself an on-base percentage guy? I know you steal a lot of bases too. Or how do you think of yourself as a hitter when you, if you had to describe yourself as a hitter to other people, how would you describe yourself?
I would probably describe myself as something that I am striving towards every day, and that's a contact hitter with power. Because I've tried it before to sell out on pitches, to guess pitches, to try to get my A swing off every single time to hit a home run, and it doesn't work for me. So that's something that I did in school ball this year, and even in pro ball. I know the power numbers weren't there, but I think that was just, dealing with finding a bat and still getting used to the velocity every day and stuff like that. But in school ball too, really, I simplified everything. calm my leg kick down. I was, working on, just hitting singles up the middle. That's all I wanted to do. And before I know it, I have 10-plus home runs, and then it's like, where did this come from? And I think that was just, I listened to a podcast, too, that, helped me throughout the season. And that's something that was said in the podcast is, hit ball hard and you win. And that's something I just went up to the plate with every day was just, hit the ball hard, but keep it simple and don't try to do too much. And, I started getting more hits and more extra base hits, and soon enough I was comfortable with my swing that, I was finding myself hitting home runs when I was trying to, instead of trying to every single time and failing, doing the same thing every single time, if that makes sense.
You said something there that I think is a phrase that people hear constantly. Don't try to do too much. I think it's a right. Phrase that coaches probably use so much that sometimes with players it's something you even gloss over a little bit, or maybe don't even know exactly how to define. Because I don't know that coaches, it's a term you hear so often. I think coaches just expect, and I'm talking like youth coaches, high school and below. I think
right.
that they just expect kids to know exactly what that means, but I don't know that they always do. How would you define that term? Don't try to do too much. For you as a player, Riley, what does that mean? How would you what visual picture does that put in your mind? And as far as approach goes, what is that? What does it mean to you to have an approach that says that's not trying to do too much?
Yeah, I think that's something that needs to be needs more depth to it. There's a ton of depth to that, and a lot of times it's like a coach will say that and then that's it. But that kind of goes in one ear and out the other, because I've been told that my entire life, and I'm really just figuring it out now. And that's, you have to be a good hitter before you can be like a good power hitter or something like that. A guy who knows he has power because he hits home runs in batting practice, that doesn't mean that you're going to hit home runs in the game. And when I found out I was driving the ball and I could hit a ball out whenever I wanted to in batting practice, I was like, okay, so this is what I need to do in the game. So I was taking that batting practice swing, and, it looked really good. I was hitting home runs out to every part of the field, but I would get in the game and I would go for 4 with 3 rollovers and a strikeout. So I was like, well, what's that? But I was trying to do too much at the plate because I knew I had that power in there, but I wasn't a good hitter yet. And I think that's something that really needs to be focused on, is not doing too much doesn't mean you're not being aggressive at the plate. That just means you're setting your sights on a different part of the field than the left field or right field, based on whether you're a lefty or righty, the wall out there. And that's something that took me a long time to learn, is that, I was that type of hitter in high school, and then I went to college and I found out I had some power, some real power, and that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to be the home run guy. I wanted to hit home runs, but what comes from hitting home runs are pretty much accidents, you square a ball up and it goes out. But anybody who hits home runs, for the most part, is thinking, for a righty, right center gap up the middle, just base hits, and then whether you're a little bit early or a little bit late, you'll get a backside single, or if you're early, you can do some damage to the left side of the field, and that's where your home runs come from. When guys get really good, they can start hitting all over the field, and those guys are getting paid a lot of money. But I think that's something that really needs to be focused on, is not doing too much doesn't mean go up there and, just try to make contact, because that doesn't work either. You have to go up there and be aggressive and attack the baseball, but with a purpose, not spinning out, not trying to drive the ball over the wall every single time. It's get your base hits up the middle, and then once you're comfortable, you learn how to get those backside singles when it's 0-2 or 1-2 or 2-2, you're down in the count. You learn how to get those backside singles and stay on pitches, and then all of a sudden, you're blacking out on the inside fastball or fastball up, and you're hitting that ball out because you're so focused on the ball, hitting it up the middle, that your body just reacts, and those home runs come from that.
That is something that I wish that more kids would hear, that message.
Yeah, and it's as simple as it is. It's what makes every good hitter good. You know what I mean?
Why? I mean, you kind of answered this, but I'm just going to ask you a little more pointed. Why does you mentioned earlier? I mean, even before this question, 5-10 minutes ago, whenever it was, that you try to hit singles up the middle, but I mean, you want those results. Like sometimes I think that's the issue. Kids or people that want to argue that approach, it's like, well, I don't want to hit backside singles. I want to hit pull side doubles and pull side homers. But what they don't understand is that the approach that you're talking about leads to those extra base hits, but it's the approach that works. Can you just kind of talk about for yourself why that works? Why singles up the middle work for you, and how they end up resulting in doubles and homers? And maybe you sort of already answered it, but maybe there's a little more specific answer that we can get to here. I just, if you were talking to a group of high school hitters, if you were talking to yourself as a 16-year-old, how would you sell your 16-year-old self who's a couple years away from going to college and kind of finding this power as your body, as you grow and mature, and you start to you lift and you start to see the ball jump off the bat, and you start to feel like, man, maybe I can hit some home runs here. How would you sort of convince that 16, 17, 18-year-old you to keep that single up the middle approach and trust that it's going to result in plenty of extra base hits? How would you sell that? How would you sell that to someone, your 16-year-old self?
Yeah, because like the guys that can just to go up there and take swings every time to hit home run, there's only like 15 baseball players in the world that can do that, every time and be successful at it. You got your guys who still play at a high level today that hit 40, 50 home runs, but, or 30 or 25, 30, 40 home runs that hit, 190 or whatever. And there's no longevity there. Those guys, even then, still have to learn to hit for contact. And just like telling myself that as a 16-year-old, it's like those results, like the results that you want, which are doubles, triples, home runs, come from learning how to hit. The art of hitting is what, like, one of my hitting coaches kind of taught me. That is like the art of hitting and getting those backside singles, and where it gets a good pitcher who. Because then you move up the level, you get to that higher level. There's those good pitchers who they're going to carve you up every single time if you go up there and you try to hit a home run, because they throw hard. They can throw what they want, whatever pitch they want, and whatever count they want. So if you're selling out for fastballs, they're just going to spin something right and you're going to swing over it. You have to really focus on that up the middle approach, backside approach, and that needs to be the thought process. And I'm still figuring out the why to that really too. And I think it's just because you're within yourself, within what your body is good at and how you move, and then you learn your timing mechanisms better. You understand them and what it takes to get those base hits up the middle off a guy who's throwing 95, 96. And then once you learn how to do that, the results that you want will come from that, whether you're a little bit early, but your bat head's still on plane in the zone because you're not pulling out trying to hit home runs. You're a little early and you catch that ball a little more out front, and that's a home run or a double to left field. Or when you're really focused on staying up the middle in that fastball approach and you see a slider away and you hit that, that's that pitcher's best pitch, is that slider low and away, and you hit that for a single up the middle, or you're a little early and you pull it for a single, and you learn how to do that, then that opens him up. He's got to throw more fastballs because you can hit his best pitch. So then you get more fastballs, and that's the pitch that we need to be really good at, driving the ball and, hitting those for our extra base hits and stuff like that. But I think just that contact approach of still, doing damage, but in the middle of the field, the big part of the field, keeps you on the ball so you're not spinning off or things like that. And that'll really just open, up a lot of opportunity at the plate for you.
Do the Blue Jays as an organization have, an organizational philosophy for someone like you? I mean, you're a big guy. You've hit for power in the past. I'm sure that, again, your first year, I think it's very standard for guys to, to not hit for a lot of power their first year in pro ball. But I'm sure they would expect more power to come in the future. Do they have an organizational philosophy for hitters, or maybe that's something that you'll experience as you are in the system for a couple more years? But your philosophy is, from just talking with you, is try to hit hard, hit the ball hard and try to hit singles up the middle and let the extra base hits happen. You want to be a good contact hitter. Is that in line with what the Blue Jays believe, or do they kind of let guys be individuals and play to their strengths? Just kind of curious how organizations go about it, because I know in colleges sometimes some colleges this is kind of our hitting philosophy, and this is kind of how the way everybody hits when they're here, and I think some pro organizations are that way as well, or maybe they draft that way. At least they try to draft certain types of hitters. Have you had that conversation with anybody within the Blue Jays organization to know whether or not your philosophy will be something that's going to work long term, or if they're going to try to to get some different results out of you at any point? Have you had that conversation with anybody, Riley?
Yeah, so I'm fresh to the organization, but from day one that I got there, there's really been no swing changes for me. There's only been recommendations, and the one thing that they've told me was stay in my back hip longer and launch from there, and that'll create more pop. But there's no swing changes other than that. And the main philosophy that the Blue Jays have is just do damage in the heart of the plate. But another thing that they check is, swing decision and contact rate in the zone. So if you have a low contact rate in the zone, for me personally, it's because I'm missing those pitches. It's because I'm trying to do too much and I'm trying to drive the ball, out of the yard, and I'm missing fastballs down the middle or something like that. A pitch that I can very much handle, I'm no longer able to handle it, and I'm taking bad swings, so my swing decision goes down, and then my contact rate in the zone goes down because I'm trying to do too much with the pitches that are thrown at me. And I think that the do damage in the heart of the plate is one way of saying that, and along with the swing decision scores and things like that, do damage in the heart of the plate. If you want to have a high swing percentage, decision percentage, and a contact rate in the zone, you want those high, you have to do damage in the heart of the plate. And with my philosophy, I think that if I want those up, those swing percentage scores up, I have to think the middle of the field, and I can't get too big. And so if I'm taking those swings like within myself, staying through the middle of the field, and my scores are high, that's basically, that's what they want, and that goes right along with my philosophy that, that works for me in my head, things like that.
You've got a really advanced approach. I know you went to college, you weren't a high school draft pick, but I think you just have such an advanced approach, Riley, and it's easy to see why you've had a good bit of success the last full calendar year. Mm-hmm. Curious about you.
It's actually a very simple approach if you think about it. Honestly, it's like, I want to hit singles up the middle, stay within myself, and that's like, there's a lot more to it. But if you just stay within that approach, those basics, get to your balance position, be on time, and stay worked through the middle of the field within yourself, you're going to have a lot of success.
Well, that's where I think the maturity is, honestly. I think that the immature player, I mean, kind of like you did early in your college career, you complicate things, or you get away from what's worked because of one thing or another.
Right.
In your case, you start to physically mature, you see some more power, so you start to think maybe you can be a different kind of hitter. I think it's a very, very mature approach to have a very simple approach.
Absolutely.
And to keep that and not abandon that when things change, or you change levels, or you change the type of bat you're using, or what that bat's made out of, or whatever. Right. When you're in the box, do you guess? Are you a guess? Would you consider yourself a guess hitter? Do you ever sit on a pitch? I shouldn't say ever, but do you guess a lot? or only in very specific counts, or are you a guy that kind of recognizes, try to see the ball, hit the ball, react to it? Just kind of curious on that part of things.
Right. So I think I guess every once in a while, but that comes within later in the games or later in a series against a team. If you play a team, you're going to play them six games in a row, 6 days in a row, and they're getting you out a certain way. Whether that's they're starting you with a fastball up, and they change your eye level, and then they spin something low, and then you roll over on it. So that's a way that they can get you out, and I think that you have to understand how you work as a hitter is completely different to anyone else, and that's just comes from getting hundreds and hundreds and 1,000 at bats. What gets you out, and everyone has that pitch to where that pitch is thrown there, and that sequence, you're gonna swing at it, and chances are you aren't ready for it, and you roll it over, or you pop it up, or something like that. And I think the only time that I really guess pitches is, later in the games if, I've gotten out a few times and or I have a successful first at bat and I smoke a fastball, they're not going to throw me that same fastball most likely, in that same count. So I might sit, if he has a slider, I'll sit slider here, 0-0, and if he throws it up and down the middle of the plate, I'm gonna hammer it, and because I'm waiting on it. But you can't think like that every time, because it won't work. First of all, because if you're guessing pitches every single time, you're gonna guess wrong, and you're gonna swing, and you're gonna be late, and you're gonna hit a weak fly ball or roll over on something. So I think it's more of an educated guessing, and based on past at bats or what they're throwing your buddies or things like that. So you really have to know if they're going to throw that pitch, and if they don't, it's back to seeing the fastball in your zone and hitting it up the middle. And if they don't throw that pitch in that count and you take it because you're looking for something else, it's back to that middle approach, staying on that fastball through the middle in the big part of the field, and then that'll really just open doors for you if you really think about your at bats and think about how they're throwing you throughout the weekend, or how they threw you last time. If you're in high school, the last time you saw that pitcher, what did he do to get you out, or what did he throw and you smashed? Because he's probably not going to do it again. Because they know that you can hit that fastball up in any count, so they're going to work you. They're going to work you low in the bottom of the zone with slow stuff. So you have to be really looking for that low in the zone, slow stuff, because it's going to come because you've hit their fastball before. So I think it's something you just really have to. It takes time to learn that, and I don't think we're ever done learning that. I'm still new at that too. Is like you don't know, you don't ever know what they're going to throw you, so you just have to really be a student of your at bats and your teammates at bats and things like that, and really just focus on what makes that pitcher good and what's his out pitch, and just really think about what he's thrown you in the past and what he throws your buddies.
Do you think most of the guys that you play with are the same way? Maybe you don't know that answer, but do you think most of the guys you play with, both in college and pro ball, are they the same? Are they mostly going up there, having a plan and having an idea what might be thrown, but for the most part, they're just trying to, see it and hit it, just react as opposed to guessing?
Yeah, I think everyone's different too. Is like a guy could, he could go up there and guess every pitch, and he's just really good at guessing pitches, and that's his thing. That's what he does. There's money. I think, guys who can't do that, most of them probably have that similar approach that I do. Is, you're on time for a fastball, and that's what you're hitting more times than not. Every pitch you see is, most of the time you're thinking fastball. And I think that a lot of guys do that, and everyone's different, and maybe nobody thinks like I do. I don't really know. I've talked a lot about that because that's something that I'm still figuring out on my own, and something that's working for me. It might not work for somebody else, or somebody might call me crazy for even thinking about what pitch is going to be coming, because it's hard to guess. So I think that everyone's different, and it's just really based on what works for you. And sometimes talking to somebody who's a good hitter, isn't always the best thing, because their approach might be, yeah, I just go up there and hit. I don't think I just hit, and then something. Well, okay, I need a little bit more to my approach than just that, because this guy goes up there and he's just hitting, and he's hitting 330 with 10 jacks. It's like, well, I mean, I'm not going to go do that with no plan or anything like that. So those guys are really talented, and some of them at a high level, a lot of them might say that, they just go up there and hit. That's fine, but if that doesn't work for you, and at some point it's probably going to stop, because guys are good and there's scouting reports on you as a hitter, and these coaches know what probably. I mean, I'm sure it's happening in high school now. It's getting earlier and earlier that there's scouting reports and video analysis and synergy and things like that, and they know what to throw you at a certain point in your career, whether you like it or not. So that approach only works for a few guys, and you really have to find what works for you and simplify in everything. And if you know he's going to throw you a slider because you hammered his fastball, sit on that slider for 2 or 3 pitches, and if you don't get it, then you're in defense mode, and you gotta kind of battle.
We talked about hitting most of this podcast, and we're getting toward the end of it. I'd like to I do want to talk about some other things and just give the listeners of this podcast a pretty rounded idea of just your overall game and the things that you need to do to be as good of a player as you can be, not just as good of a hitter as you can be. During the season, preseason and during the season, how much of your time percentage-wise is spent working on defense compared to working on hitting?
Probably not as much as it should be. In the season, I have my everyday routine and hitting. So in the season, it's definitely equal. In the off season, especially right now, early in the off season, I want my swing to be perfect. Not perfect, never perfect, but I want my swing to be really solid, fundamentally and mechanically and things like that. And so I really want to focus in. I'm learning a lot longer throughout the year, and now is my first pro off season. I have 4 months or so by myself, and I'm on my own, so I'm really figuring out how to maximize my off season time and what works for me. And so far I've really focused on my body and my flexibility, my mobility, my strength and things like that. But now when I'm starting to hit, I really want my swing to be sound fundamentally before I start, ramping it up for machine work and live at bats come spring training. So once I feel really good with my swing, I'm still doing defense work now. I'll get back to my everyday routine, and that's just for defense. It's just I'm an infielder, so I'll do some short hops, take a few ground balls, and really just make sure my feet are working towards first base and I'm in a good fielding position, and make sure my hands are just going, and then just make sure my arm is right. But that'll come here soon with that everyday routine. But for right now, I'm really still focusing on my body in the weight room and my mobility and things like that, and just getting back into swinging. I want my swing to be in a good spot after taking so much time off, and just going through a different season than I have in the past with college, because I'm still working on defense every day at practice, team practice every day until mid-December or so. And then I have that month home where I'm by myself instead of now where I'm working for 4 months by myself. So I think that there's more time, and I can get started a little bit later with certain things. But once I'm in full off-season mode, like I'm almost there, it'll be defense 4 or 5 times a week, hitting 4 or 5 times a week, lifting 5 times a week. So it's pretty much every day, and I think that's something that you have to make it an everyday routine. And you of course need your off days, but you have to find that routine that works for you to make sure you get in that work that you need every single day. So you're not behind. And I don't want to be behind when I get to spring training for guys that, are in a warm state that can get outside and do things like that. I need to make sure I can get my defense in, make sure I get my live at-bats in, make sure my body's right, and I'm in shape for, 142 games next year or whatever it is.
With your off-season lifting program, you mentioned that you're lifting 4 times a week now, and you said even 5 times a week during the season, or preseason, whenever that was. When you're in the weight room, Riley, are you actually lifting every day you're in the weight room, or do you have days that are strictly focused on stretching, mobility, things like that, or are you actually throwing weight around every day?
So 4 days a week, I'm throwing weight around. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, I have full lifts. Monday, Thursday are primarily like leg lifts, squat, deadlift, RDLs, glute exercises and things like that. And then Tuesday, Thursday is a lot of more upper body stuff. You're still doing your lower body stuff to make sure you're stretched out and you're mobile, because you do have to run on those upper body days. So you're still doing your hip mobility, you're still stretching out your hamstrings and your hip flexors and things like that. And then on that Wednesday, every Wednesday is more of like I gotta hit arms every once in a while. So I get in the weight room, I get a good arm workout in. I make sure I do my active recovery stuff, which is hip mobility, some body weight RDLs to make sure I'm getting into my hips and things like that. And so I think every day is definitely not throwing weight around in the weight room. It's more of having like a purpose. And even if you don't have a lift a certain day, you can still do your mobility, do your hip mobility, make sure your body's loose, make sure all your glutes are activated, and doing your band exercises with your upper body and things like that. Just making sure it's not a lift day, but it's an active recovery day instead of just an off day where you're not doing anything. You're sitting on the couch. You're not getting any sort of movement or workout in at all. That it's not a taxing workout whatsoever. It's just making sure your body is just moving around and activated.
What about during the season? Do you lift the same way during the season? Do you change your lifts at all during the season? Obviously you haven't been through a full minor league season of 140 some games, but right. You did play a full 56 games in college baseball this year, and then played minor league baseball as well. Do you lift during the season, Riley? And if so, just can you give people an idea of how often, if it's the same intensity as the off season, if you're changing anything around? I think the off season or the mid-season lifts, I think it's a little more of a gray area for some people. But do you mind just kind of sharing what you do and what you have done in the past?
Yeah, I think in college is a little different because you play one midweek game and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So you have off days, like complete off days, to where you do a little team. But in college, I focused on getting 2 really good lifts, but try to get 3 lifts in every week. And that, I kind of kept that going towards pro ball too, is I was getting 2 really good lifts in and 3 if I could. So my goal was to get 3 lifts in every week, but 2 of those lift days, a heavier deadlift day, not a heavy deadlift day, but make sure you're still maintaining your strength. And also, I'm not a strength coach, so I don't know the proper verbiage and things like that. But for me, it was like I haven't played a 140-game season yet, but even when I was in summer ball in the Northwoods playing 72 games, I still lifted 2 to 3 times a week. I actually put on 10 pounds in that summer, and so I was really lifting like 4 times a week every day or every week in that summer ball schedule. But for pro ball, I think it's more of maintaining instead of trying to make gains, which there's nothing wrong with making gains during the season. You're just going to be really fatigued, because even in the short amount of time that I was in single A this year, I was fatigued after game 5 every week, and you still got to get a lift in. And make sure your body's moving right and make sure your muscles are all activated and things like that. But it's more of personal preference. I know guys that can't stand to lift during the season because they're really sore. But I like to get to a point of the season where that lift isn't going to make me sore. It's going to strengthen everything around what is already sore and kind of take some stress off of, the muscles that you're using during the game, and just finding out what works for you based on your schedule and, how fatigued you are. But yes, definitely still have to lift during the season.
I think that's it's really important, but it's something that I think in again, youth baseball, high school and below is a gray area for some people, because I think a lot of it is because of the soreness. I think guys are afraid to get sore in the weight room and then play. But like you said, I think that you can structure your lift so that, the things that are sore, you're lifting and you're focusing on other body parts, other muscle groups, and sort of supplementing and keeping up that strength is something you hear a lot, especially for high school guys who, their metabolism is so high, it's probably very hard for them to gain and maintain weight, and you're definitely not going to maintain it if you don't lift during the season.
Right.
Riley, one or two more questions for you, just sort of to wrap things up. Do you have somebody in your life that you rely on just to kind of help you stay centered or grounded, or someone that you talk to when you're struggling? Maybe whether it is an old coach from any level, or someone in your family or a friend or whoever. Do you have somebody that you can kind of rely on when things aren't going well? Because inevitably we all struggle. I know that you've had a couple of years in college that were probably pretty frustrating for you, and even whether it's not even a whole season, but just a week where things aren't going well. Do you have somebody that you talk to, that you lean on to help you when things aren't going great for you?
Yeah, I mean, my parents are really good at that, and whether it's like a phone call or whether they're down for the weekend at a game at Dayton and I'm struggling, and let's go get a bite to eat, and it shows that that your performance isn't everything, because your parents are still going to be there to take you out to eat and talk normally like everything's normal. There's nothing something that's comforting to me is always has been is whether I go 0 for 4 or 4 for 4, my parents both say that, they're still proud of me and things like that. And I think that's something that everyone needs is like, you can't base like your life and how you go about your day and your happiness based on your performance, because inevitably you're going to stink for more than one game in a row, So if you're taking every swing with you and every at bat with you off the field and into your relationships with your family or your friends or your girlfriends or whatever, if you're taking your struggles into that part of your life, your whole life's going to be miserable, and nobody's going to show up to the field when they feel miserable because they went 0 for 4 yesterday and have a successful day because you're already down, you're already beat. So I think just, that's something that comes with maturity too, is, in the past, I've taken that 0 for 4 and I've thought about it and sat about it and like looked up video and really tried to figure out why I went 0 for 4 when, that just happens. You could go 0 for 4 with 3 lineouts and a ground out, but you still make solid contact, three of the 4 at bats. Like that's a good day, because the game's hard, and you could smash a ball and somebody robs it and you're out. That's 0 for 1. But I think the only time really to like really sit down and focus is if you're striking out a lot or you're doing the same thing every single time. That's when you go back to the drawing board and you look at your swing and things like that and figure out what's going wrong. But I think just having people around you that you understand that your success isn't based on like their, your guys' friendship or your relationship with your family. They do care because they want to see you do well, but they don't. That's not what they're basing their relationship off of you with, is how you perform. Anybody who's a true friend or a family member, that doesn't matter to them. They're still going to love you. They're still going to like you. They're still going to care about you. And that's just comforting for me, is knowing that whatever I do on the field is we're going to go eat dinner or whatever, and everything's going to be completely normal. We're still going to talk about baseball, and if I want to talk about it, I can. But for me, it's like if I had a bad game, I don't want to talk about it. I don't, because I'm just gonna dwell on it and things like that. I just want to go be normal, have fun, do whatever, and show up the next day with doing my same routine in the cage and just getting back to the basics of my approach and staying on the ball at the middle. And if I do well, I do well. If not, it's not the end of the world. I got 4 more at bats the next day and 4 more than the day after that. So you're always going to get more at bats, and if you take them with you to every part of your life, your life's not going to be fun because you're not going to be good at baseball every single day.
It's a really mature approach. This has been an awesome podcast. I do actually want to ask you one more quick thing before I let you go, Riley. You mentioned in the last year that you listened to a podcast that helped you out a lot as a hitter. Do you mind just kind of telling people who or what that is, or if you have certain podcasts you listen to? I think even though at Figured Out Baseball, we try to be, a resource that kind of covers everything that young hitters and pitchers and coaches and parents need. But I know that there are other good resources out there. Do you have another podcast you like to listen to, or is this, or at least the one you listened to, was it just maybe it was the only one you listened to that you like? But you mind sharing which podcast that was?
Yeah, it was. I don't even know if it was a podcast. It might have just been. There's only one episode. One audiobook, and I've listened to it more than one time for sure. I've listened to it probably 10 or 15 times. It's the mental side of hitting. It's Steve Springer. He was with the Blue Jays for a while. I'm not sure what he's doing now. I follow him on social media and all that stuff, and everything he puts up there is really the game and taking out. He doesn't really talk swing mechanics really ever from what I've heard. Is more of just all is, hit how hard you win, hit the inside part of the baseball and the field. Watch your at bats, know what he's thrown you, and know what he's thrown your buddies at the plate and things like that. And so I think that Springer audiobook is really good for a hitter at any level, and a hitter at a high level can listen to it and be like, oh, this is pretty mature or immature. I already know all this stuff, but it's still hitting. It's still baseball. It's still the same game we've been playing for countless years, 20 years or whatever. So I think that's something that just brings me back to normal and, really simplifies everything for me and just gets me back on the right track.
Steve Springer, he's awesome. He was on one of our podcasts here early on, and I have a lot of respect for Steve and what he does. He's all about, competing with confidence and playing every day like it's opening day, and
right.
He's awesome. So yes, if you haven't listened to Steve Springer, we've got one of his podcasts on the Figured Out Baseball website, but he's got a lot of other resources out there. If you haven't checked him out, you definitely should. This is Riley Tirotta, everybody. He's a minor league third baseman in the Toronto Blue Jays organization. He finished his first season of pro ball, be heading into his second season of pro ball now. And Riley, I hope that you and I get to catch up again in the future on this podcast, whether it's throughout your playing career or whenever it is. But I hope this isn't the last time we hear from you. I certainly appreciate your time today and all that you've shared. You're a very mature kid, for your age, and if, whether it's talking hitting or just, life in general, or the perspective that, baseball and how that is meshed with the rest of your life. I've really enjoyed this. I think that you've got a great head in your shoulders, and I can understand why your coach, pointed me in the direction of having you on here. This has been really thoroughly enjoyable, and I just appreciate your time and all that you shared.
Absolutely, man. Thank you very much for having me. I'm a fan of the website, and, we'd love to get back together and do another episode or do some video or something like that, man. But yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's been great.